Senator Abrams, you have the floor.
Madam President, I rise to make my contribution to this Appropriations Bill 2018-2019. Madam President, from the outset, I first wish to join with Senator Watson and to express my sympathy and concern to Senator McLean on her recent traumatic experience. I personally hope the perpetrator is caught and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The lawlessness and violence prevalent in Barbados must be condemned in the harshest possible way, and I wish to do so from here. I would have spoken to Senator McLean, and I would have done it publicly on my Facebook page. As apart from her being the leader of government business in the Senate, having the stature that she enjoys in Barbados, she's also somebody that I know. And you can become immune to things that happen to people that you don't really know. But when it comes home to somebody that you are familiar with and you interact with, if not on a daily but on a weekly basis, it makes it all too real. So Senator McLean, you have my deepest sympathies on what happened. I wanted to say at the outset, as a most genuine statement, and not have it color anything that follows in my presentation. Madam President, last year, I began my presentation by thanking my colleague, Senator Walker, for schooling Senator McLean, who presented the government's 2017-2018 estimates in perhaps a more muddled manner than even the estimates themselves were presented, and enlightening her and guiding her as to how the process should be handled. Like how many Barbadians now wish to have back the former Prime Minister Erskine Sandiford in the face of the current mismatch with the present office holder. I never thought I would say this, but as we endured the first torturous presentation by Senator Bayasuku, I must say, I never thought I'd say this, but I wished for Senator McLean as a presenter. As with about everything that this government does, when we thought the presentation of the estimates, the lead-off presentation of the estimates could not get any worse, it did. Enter Senator Bayasuku. At the beginning, I commiserated with Senator McLean, and I wish to do so, and that was personal. I wish to do so politically, because it appears that she is now only the titular head of government business in the Senate. At least she knows now that she's being replaced, and the title of the worst presentation by the government since I've been in the Senate now goes to Senator Bayasuku. The worst ever. Thankfully, I hope that Barbados and Barbadians will never have to endure what we endured on Monday again. Senator Bayasuku's presentation was at best disjointed and disheveled. After 2 rambling hours, the general reaction was, what just happened? Had I not been steadfastly making notes of the things I'm going to comment on shortly, I probably could not tell you a word that was said. And I did it for the light and laughable value as opposed to the serious and in-depth analysis that it should have been. We had a full 15-minute introduction to the estimates about an old report on a survey about what people want: communities, family life. This was delivered by the senator with all the animation of a brand new discovery. The one thing, she was excitable about her presentation. I must give her that. She was excited and excitable about her presentation. I don't know about anybody else, but I was hoping for a dissertation on how government intends to spend our money and supposedly deal with the numerous economic and financial issues. And instead we got meanderings in every direction except what should have been our focus. This government has mastered the art of not seeing or doing what is obvious. We heard about her age, 49, but looking like 28. We got a ramble. No, he said she didn't look a day over 49. We got a ramble on the physical and the spiritual. We had scriptural lessons, and we had sing-alongs. We had everything about what the estimate should be about, and how it is going to help to make the lives of Barbadians better. How it is going to lift, how the government plans with these estimates to lift our country out of financial ruin and walk us back from the edge of the fiscal cliff where this Democratic Labour Party government has marched us brutally, unrelenting, ignoring everything and everyone that could have prevented our continuing collapse. But even on her own road to Damascus, Senator Bayasuku could not find enlightenment. In fact, she could not find any energy. When called upon to move from the frivolous to the serious, she once again regurgitated that now stale and warmed over DLP vomit about a society and an economy. Once again, it took Senator Walker to take the chamber through these estimates. It took Senator Walker to take the chamber through these estimates, as should be the case, while at the same time highlighting worsening conditions everywhere, from the hospitals to the roads, and that these estimates were, to use his word he likes to use, were another exercise in froth. Actually, he says it, froth. Just like the 9 recovery plans to which we were treated before this new magic plan is being trumpeted. And to cap it off, Senator Walker was feeling under the weather. He didn't, at the beginning of the day, he told me he did not even know whether he could do it. And he may ask me to, but he's a trooper. His heart is in the right place. Therein lays the tale of 2 doctors. But I guess as a surgeon, Senator Walker understands the need to be clinical, to be focused, to be detailed, to present properly, and to execute in a way that makes sense. Senator Suku obviously forgot in all her religious fervor the importance of confession. I said forgot because she unwittingly contradicted herself and her government by her own statements. She spoke of building societies, but no government in the history of Barbados has done more to destroy communities and families than this current government. This government, of which Senator Suku is an integral part, and these estimates do nothing at all to stop the rot. She said the government has not seen the implementation of certain private sector projects, and we need to get things going. We need to get things going. What an admission of failure on the part of this government. There's a saying about attempting to give an appearance of solidity to what is essentially wind. And that is the best way that I can describe her presentation. Senator Bayasuku for 2 hours attempted to give the appearance of solidity to what is wind. and the wind being the policies and the plans of this government. This government, with their many plans and catastrophic failures, could not do it and turn us around in 10 years. But yet, they want to have another try. As I said, and I do this by way of comparison because I've come to expect certain things. I don't necessarily agree with everything that is said by the presenters on that side. But quite often, there's something you can pull from the presentations that make you understand what the plan is. And you may not agree with it, but you can at least see a coherent plan. The highlights of Senator Bayasuku's presentation was to reaffirm that we are not number one, but the Barbados Labour Party is engaging in unsportsmanlike conduct. They're booing from the bleachers, and I will come back to that one. Potholes, bush, and sewage are hurdles, but hurdles are meant to be overcome. These are my notes. Accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative. In her wrap-up, she called for unity. She said, this is a time for unity. We have a plan. We can spend our time pulling down the plan, or we can get to working on it. And she chimed in with the song, We've Only Just Begun. And most critically, she said this a couple of times, she wants to urge Barbadians and Barbados to drown out the negatives and the naysayers. With nothing much to say of her own accord, and exposing a lack of either belief or knowledge in the estimates, the senator sought to construct a scenario of 50 years of progress since independence. And she ended with the Carpenter's song, We've Only Just Begun. Yes, we have had 50 years of progress since independence. But it is typical of this government to try to spin back to being 50 years of DLP progress or DLP-led progress, when no one has done more to derail that progress than this present government. Understand, Madam President, I tremendously admire the Right Honorable, excellent Sir Errol Walton Barrow. I admire him as a great man and a visionary. And I say that unreservedly. Some may have questioned the policies of the former Prime Minister, Sandiford, Sir Lloyd Sandiford. But people had to accept that his heart was in the right place. We've had great leaders in Grantley Adams, Tom Adams, and Owen Arthur. But this current government is the worst government, not the worst DLP government or the worst when compared with the BLP government. This is the worst government that has ever held power in Barbados. But they want to talk about 50 years of progress when nobody has done more to derail progress in Barbados than this government. In every aspect, macro, micro, foreign reserves, investment to infrastructure, social services, this government has made Barbados times worse than it was 10 years ago. To claim any contribution to the success or progress of Barbados is an exercise in propaganda, which this government does so well, and concentrates, instead of actual facing reality, it concentrates on the propaganda. Instead of actually contributing positively to nation building, it concentrates on the spin. It is a farce and false. It is farce and false for this government to try to absolve itself from great sins by trying to insert itself into the history of Barbados. the 50 years of progress in any meaningful way. The trainees say cockroach has no right in foul cock business. And if I was to rewrite the history of Barbados, I would ensure that this particular government had its deserved place with the correct adjectives. No wonder Senator Bayer Suku chose to refer to the carpenters. They were known as what is called light pop. I want to introduce the senator to some songs less airy-fairy, and more appropriate to Barbados' current situation. I don't know whether the senator has ever heard of the song Sinking Ship by Gypsy. The lyrics are most apt. Captain, this ship is sinking. Captain, the seas are rough. We gas tank almost empty. No electricity. We oil pressure reading low. Shall we abandon ship, or shall we stay on it and perish slow? We don't know. We don't know. Captain, you tell us what to do. Gypsy ended that with, Captain, you tell us what to do. But I don't need the captain of this ship to tell me what to do. I know what to do when the time comes, and I'm sure that the majority of Barbados will know what to do when the time comes. If that one doesn't resonate with the senator, I urge you to think of Get Up, Stand Up by Bob Marley. Stand up for your rights. Maybe she prefers a bit more robust and radical, at which point we'll go Equal Rights by Herbert Peter McIntosh, known as Peter Tosh. And yes, The Times Are Changing by Bob Dylan. But even as she wallowed in the carpenter's irrelevance, the senator could not restrain herself from the type of invective for which this government is known. Let me say that contrary to the mouthings of some, the Barbados Labour Party does not and has never wished for pandemonium in Barbados. We are not the ones who advocated cracking heads and shooting people. We are not the ones who suggested that blood is going to flow in the streets of Barbados come election time. We are not the ones who said and warned that this was going to be an election fought in the gutter. We are not the ones who choked their constituents and accused them of posting profoundest, I don't want to get him wrong, obscenities when somebody put a sign on their gate saying they were fed up, and causing a minister of this government to say he will protect his property and his person at any lengths. That is not the Barbados Labour Party. We're not about promoting pandemonium. We want to see Barbados recover. We want to see Barbados back on track. Senator Worrell spoke about a plan by the Barbados Labour Party to send home thousands of people. I wish to remind Senator Worrell, there was no plan voiced by Barbados Labour Party to send home thousands of people. I have no knowledge of any plan to send home thousands of people. But in fact, it was this government that before the last elections came to power on the basis of three promises. No layoffs, no sell-offs, no tuition fees. No layoffs, no sell-offs, no tuition fees. They came in and promptly sent home 3,000 people. They came in and promptly tried to sell off every jewel in the family assets. Every family heirloom this government tried to dispense with in a shameless money grab. But the tuition fees, I don't even say anything about that. The three promises that were the slogan that marched this government into power, no layoffs, no sell-off, no tuition fees, have fallen by the wayside. They were no much more than wind. And this government wants us to have faith in another project, another plan, and to ban and unify around the government for another 10 years. This government must know that they will not win another government by trying to pin foolishness on the Barbados Labour Party. That is beneath even Senator Bayer Suku's confused presentation. We, in the Barbados Civil Party, wish like everybody else that things will settle down. But the fact is, they have not settled. And I hazard to say, I do not believe that they will settle under this government. To quote the Senator again, look beyond the headlines. Well, beyond the fanciful claims, of this DLP government, beyond the headlines, there's suffering, continued business failures, a terrible and crippled bus service. There is sewage flowing in the streets of Barbados for years. No proper garbage collection. In some places, no garbage collection at all. Foreign reserves are gone. Companies gone. People gone. And still more going home. As disconnected as Senator Bayasuku was from the estimates, this government is equally as disconnected from the harsh realities facing the people of Barbados and the state of the people in Barbados. It is actually not possible for a government to be more far removed from its people. I don't want to be unfair to her. Let me mention some of the things that she said, apart from the fluff. Senator Bayes spoke that there will be a minimum wage board. This is what she promised. A protection of wages bill. A prevention of discrimination in the workplace bill. That the Employment Bureau will have a name change. This kind of icing on gingerbread that this government indulges in. And that the Employment Rights Act is not going to have a second look. That is a hallmark of what this government is about. And I don't like saying it. I don't like saying it. Because the longer it goes on, the deeper we sink. It's all about promises. Promises not connected to the focus of any discussion. These promises were not connected to the estimates because they weren't reflected in there. And a walk back on every piece of legislation or program. These estimates, Madam President, can best be described as a pig in a blanket. It is the same old thing that they're trying to camouflage. If you actually go through the estimates, in many instances, it looks like a copy and paste from last year, except for where they reduced things. The government is presenting increases everywhere. From the massive taxes, 32 new taxes it has imposed. But where and how is anything in these estimates going to improve our lives one iota? The NSRL, when it first came in at 2.5%, it was heralded as being the savior of the QEH and the savior of the Sanitation Service Authority. Money from the NSRL was supposed to help out the Queen Elizabeth Hospital with its expenses. And I quote, some for the Sanitation Service Authority will go towards buying new trucks. That was when it first came out. The minister proudly proclaimed that in the first 6 months, I think he had raised $50 million, more than expected, and not one truck. They then, buoyed by the success of the NSRL that managed to grab every remaining cent that hadn't been grabbed before, raise it to 10%, from 2.5% to 10%. And what do we have to show for it? Not one truck, not one garbage truck. I heard from Senator Fraser, and I heard from Dr. Walcott and Senator Lady Haynes about the cut to the QEH. If the NSRL is raking in over $100 million more than we had before, and one of the stated purposes for the NSRL was to bail out the QEH, and to buy garbage trucks. How is it that the QH is getting less money now with the additional funds from the NSRL, and we still can't get one truck? And then we now have another recovery plan. I think it's the 10th. One for each year. The other 9 have failed spectacularly. There's no reason to expect that this one will have a different fate. Senator Bayasuku asks us to hold strain and don't give up and maintain unity. I don't know about you, Madam President, but if someone has failed 9 times, every single time they presented a plan to me, it flopped or failed. And they came with another one, which flopped or failed, until we reached 9.
Madam President, on a point of order, Senator Abrams is misleading this Senate. This Democratic Labour Party administration brought 2 recovery plans to this country. A medium-term development strategy that we revised, and we also bought this one. We started out with a $25 million tourism stabilization fund. All the others were ministerial statements, either budgetary or otherwise.
Madam President, I don't know whether the Honourable Senator is announcing yet an 11th plan, but attach whatever number you want to it. Whatever number he picks, I will go with. If anybody else flings a number from the floor, I will go with that. The point is, all failed.
Madam President, on a point of order, Senator Abrams is misleading the Senate. And if he has the plans, let him read them out before the Senate. I am saying to you that we bought 3 plans before this country and before the Senate, the medium-term development strategy, and we revised it. And now we have what we call the Barbados Sustainable Recovery Plan 2018. All the others were either budgetary or ministerial statement. Let him list them.
Madam President, they're all documents of the House, and I don't care what the Honourable Senator calls them, whether the medium-term fiscal recovery, the prayer in the wind, toss it up in the air.
Senator Abrams again is misleading the Senate. If there are documents of this House, they should be here in the Senate. Bring the documents. Bring them. And I'm going to repeat it. The Tourism Development Fund, Stabilization Fund, a medium-term development strategy that was revised, as well as the Barbados Sustainable Recovery Plan 2018. If there are documents in this Senate, bring them, or we're going to spend the whole evening in here.
Madam President, as I said, it is irrelevant how many there were. And you know what? This is a long acronym, BSRP, Barbados Sustainable Recovery Plan.
Madam President, on a point of order, he is misleading the Senate. It is not irrelevant. He made the statement that we had 9 plans. Madam President, he is misleading the Senate, and he is misleading those listening to this Senate debate that is so critical and important to the people of Barbados. If you know you want to represent people, then do not make public statements in the Senate and then say it is irrelevant. Madam President, I have respect for all of the senators in here. You cannot make those type of statements and then say it is irrelevant. Let him bring the 9 plans that failed. We have 3, bring them.
Madam President, if my friend is disputing that the 9 plans failed, I would like him to just clarify so we can move along. Exactly by his count, how many failed plans there were. Because I'd be interested to put it as a record. Let's do it by his number. I am saying, Madam President, that in the context of this most recent plan, BSRP, Barbados Sustainable Recovery Plan 2018, Madam President, they could have cut out a lot more paper, started with a blank page, right, and called it the AFP 2018, another failed plan. Because that is effectively what it is. Madam President, we heard in here about how the social partnership was on board. They got on board with this plan and they endorsed it. The private sector endorsed the plan. Oh, I thought you getting that. Madam President, we heard. Madam President, I am glad that my friend finds humor at this point where we're discussing another failed plan. That shows exactly how serious they're taking this one. Madam President, we had to hear about everybody who is endorsing. Everybody who's endorsing the plan. But then, in a very, very recent statement, subsequent to Senator Bayasuku's presentation where she talked about who endorsed the plan, no less a person than Charles Herbert, no less a person than Charles Herbert, Madam President, had to say that, no, this plan was not fully endorsed by them, and those who read full endorsement need to listen to what was written, read what was written, and listen to what was said. He said, as opposed to being the blueprint for recovery for Barbados, this plan is a long list of unprioritized objectives that still have to be prioritized, and implementation plans still have to be developed. It is not a recovery plan. It does not have an implementation plan. That is a
Madam President,
flaw.
on a point of order. Madam President, the Senator is misleading the House. He is doing so directly and indirectly by quoting the speech made of someone outside of here. For starters, Table 1 of the plan gives time frames for the implementation of each initiative. None is left with a blank space in my book. Some have short dates, some have longer dates. That, Madam President, is prioritization.
Madam President, of the private sector, Madam President, in his own words, Mr. Herbert said the support of the private sector to this plan was limited. He insisted that the plan's priorities had to be identified and an implementation plan formulated for it to be effective. This country needs to be told the priorities, how we will achieve them, when and how it will affect the people, he said. While we acknowledge the broad consensus on the objectives set out in this document, we recognize that
Madam President, on a point of order. Madam President, the Senator is misleading the House, again, directly and indirectly. That same table not only gives time frames, it also has a column that speaks to impact. All the Senator needs to do is read it for himself instead of quoting from someone who wants to forget that he signed this document.
Madam President, I is simply pointing out that from the floor of this chamber, the success, the thoroughness, the integrity, the support of this plan was heralded. Obviously, Madam President, somebody has it wrong. But in any event, my point is this. It is ambitious. It is ambitious to say the least. To come with another plan. How many more days to dissolution of Parliament? Like 10? To come with another plan on the eve of the dissolution of this Parliament. And this plan contains objectives and things to be done in September, in October this year, many next year, under which government? Why is it that the Minister of Finance now has an epiphany that he wishes the whole of Barbados to buy into, when his other epiphanies and scriptures have failed and yielded not? Madam President, what you have what we have is a DLP government delivering bitter gall, poison, year after year after year, and telling us it's honey. They keep telling us this is the solution. It is about to change. We have it right. The turnaround is imminent. How many times have we heard that from the Minister of Finance? And where are we now? In the worst financial position we have ever been in as a country. These estimates
Madam
are solely
President, on a point of order, the senator again is misleading the House. This country has recorded growth for the last 3 fiscal years. It is not right, and that is not a report from this government. That is the Central Bank report of Barbados. 3 consecutive years of growth. It is incorrect to say that there has been no growth in this country.
I didn't say there'll be no growth, Madam President. I said we're in the worst financial position we have ever been in. Those were my words. And Madam President, try pointing out 0.5% growth to the person who has not had to pay a raise in 10 years. Try pointing out 0.5% growth to the mother who goes to the supermarket, reaches the cash register and has to put back items. Madam President, now there's a phenomenon in our supermarkets and shops. It started about 3 years ago where each teller had a small basket next to them. So when people got to the cash register and realized, and they're watching the accumulation and realize that they've gone over the money they have in their pocket, and they say, well, oh shoot, that's condensed milk. But is that the one without the sugar? Oh no, put that back. And you find every reason to put it back because we are ashamed to say we can't afford it. That tray, that's my point. If that, Madam President, Madam President, those baskets have now given way to trolleys. If we go to any supermarket, next to the person, next to the cashier, is a trolley full of goods that had to be put back because the price and the total of the goods that the customer had exceeded the money they had in their pocket. That's where we have come to. So let us talk about 0.5% growth. Let us talk about 0.5% growth to people who can't feel that growth, to people who've had a more than 60% increase in their cost of living in the last 10 years. Let us talk about 0.5% growth. Madam President, these estimates are solely to keep this government limping along until the Prime Minister gives up and gives in. These estimates are fiction. The projected revenues are optimistic and inflated. The expenditure is underestimated. There will be a whole host of supplementals because these estimates are not representative of the debt the government is going to incur and the expenses and expenditure for the next year. The income in these estimates is severely inflated to allow the government to have access to more money because we all know in here, but the public does not know, that the government gets an overdraft, an effective overdraft of 10% of its estimated revenues for a year. So it's in the interest of the government to inflate the estimate on the revenues.
Madam President, Senator Abrams is misleading. Senator Abrams is misleading this Senate. On a point of order, Madam President, Senator Abrams is misleading this Senate. A government's revenue is driven by taxation, either direct or indirect taxation. So I don't know where this nonsense is coming from about you're going to inflate. If you inflate your revenue that is driven by the indirect or indirect taxation, it means you have to increase taxes both from a direct and an indirect position. So how can you inflate your revenue based on projections or on past performance of your tax revenue? Utterly nonsense.
Madam President, what is not coming off my tongue? Madam President.
Foolishness you're talking. If you don't want to ask a question.
Madam President, I was not discussing how the government raises its revenue. I'm saying that the estimates of revenue for the next year are optimistic and unrealistic and have no basis. I don't think anybody other than those sitting on that side of the table actually believe these. We're expected to take in more taxes next year than we did last year. They're projecting increased revenues in most areas. I don't know how that meshes with the projections of the central bank for the growth or the projections of the other rating agencies.
Madam President.
Oh, Lord.
Madam President, on a point of order, Senator Abrams is misleading this Senate. And I don't want to call it financial or economic ignorance. Don't let us call it that. Let us call it, Madam President, where maybe I should have said elucidation. Madam President,
Then in that case, I don't
you
give it.
cannot, Madam President, on a point of order.
If he says elucidation.
Senator, it's closed and said initially a point of order. Unless you are indicating otherwise, it is a point of order. Correct, Senator Ince?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Madam President, your GDP growth, when we talk about real GDP, is reflective of your tax position at a particular time, whether it is actual or projected. And the GDP growth would reflect that your revenue, that from the revenue side, we still have some challenge. Madam President, it says here 2016, 2017, where we performed, it was 2.0. 2017, 2018, 1.3. 2018, 2019, it is projected at 1.2. So if your GDP is projected at 1.2, Madam President, it tells me that it reflects the challenges that we are still having, and from your revenue side, as well as from your expenditure side, and you cannot project based on what he is saying. If you haven't really done what he doesn't understand, then ask a question. But don't get into financial matters that are over your head. You're flying past your nest. You're flying past your nest. You can have it.
Madam President, I actually object to the fact that the senator said that you're flying past your nest, Madam President, because I know he's not speaking to me. We address all our comments through the chair. So, Madam President, I assure you, ma'am, that your nest is secure as far as I'm concerned. Madam President, the growth from the Central Bank of Barbados, 2011, 0.6, 2012, 0.3, 2013, 0.0, 2014, 0.0, 2015, 0.7, 2016, 1.8, 2017, 1.0 projected. Madam President, there is no, actually, you know what? I'm going to dive right in, Madam President. I'm going to dive right in. Because otherwise, with the interruptions they added on time, we'll be here till midnight. The purpose of the estimates, Madam President, is to set out the details for the operating and capital spending requirements of ministries for the fiscal year commencing April 1st, 2018. These estimates should be realistic and achievable, and not rushed to be debated in this chamber 14 days before Parliament is about to be dissolved. The usually ambitious revenue projections, Madam President, are at $3.2 billion in the next financial year, up from a projected $2.9 billion at the end of this current financial year. I don't know, Madam President, in a society as crippled as us, as we are, if the government seriously expects it's going to raise $3.2 billion in the next year. Madam President, VAT revenue, I use this as an example. VAT revenue in the period 1996 to 2007, 2008 was in total $6.6 billion. In 12 years, $6.6 billion. Between 2008, 2009 and 2016, 2017, $7.6 billion. So in 9 years, we collected $7.6 billion. And according to these estimates, we're expected to collect almost $1 billion in 1 year. Now, Madam President, I don't know who's drinking the Kool-Aid. I do not know who is drinking the Kool-Aid or which Barbados that they're living in.
President, a point of order. Senator Abrams is misleading this chamber. In the matter of VAT, the figures and the estimates indicate that there was a collection of VAT of $890 million in 2016. They indicate that there was a projection of $959 million of VAT in 2017-18. They indicate that there was a collection of $934.4 million in VAT. It is therefore, I think, Madam President, pushing the bounds to indicate that the figure of $1 billion as a projection for 2017-18 is unrealistic in the light of the figures for the last 3 years, Madam President.
Madam President, just so I can plan the rest of what I'm going to say, according to your time, Madam President, how much do we have left? If we deduct these interruptions?
Let me assure you, the interruptions are always clearly laid up, and you have time now of 20 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you. Madam President, let me go straight to the heads. Under the Sanitation Service Authority, Madam President, there's $2 million less this year than there was last year. And in last year's estimate there was a about 2.5 million voted in. And in the explanatory note, it had that this was voted in for the purchase of garbage trucks. So last year we had an additional 2.5 million in the estimates for sanitation for the purchase of garbage trucks. This year, we are about $2 million less. So, Madam President, with the increased amount, if they didn't purchase one single garbage truck last year, it is unlikely that they're going to purchase any. Instead, this minister is more concerned with erections.
Madam President, Senator Abrams is misleading the Senate. A point of order, Madam President. And as I said before, on page 276, if you don't understand, ask a question. On page 276, Madam President, it's on the subhead 416. It says grants to institution. He doesn't understand that term. It is not a legal term. It's a financial term. That's what it says here for 2017, 2018, 2.4 million. I want me to $2,444,475. 2017, 2018, we voiced 4.8 million. When you go to the explanation, you should have gone to 416 to read it. 416 says provides for capital works and the purchase of vehicles for the sanitation. He's looking for the word garbage trucks. You're not going to see the word garbage trucks that says grants to institutions. And that is where he is going wrong, Madam President. And the financial year ends March 31st. And there's always room for supplementaries. Madam President, but he's looking for words, garbage trucks. It says grants to institutions, and then you look for the right subhead. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President, that makes it even worse, because if included in the money for last year was the purchase for vehicles for sanitation, and they didn't prioritize the purchasing of garbage trucks, but that proves my point exactly. And Madam President, I don't know what vehicles the sanitation needs, but I know for certain it needs garbage trucks. And I know for certain no new garbage trucks have arrived in Barbados since. We have heard over and over and over from this minister about 5 or 6 different times that the garbage trucks have been ordered. They're on the way. They're then trying to source and see whether we should go with electric. They're ordered. Madam President, if these garbage trucks had been ordered at any point in time, they must be coming from Uzbekistan on a single paddle canoe in parts to be assembled when they got here. That's the only way they could not be here. These garbage trucks have not been ordered. Why would any minister focus on the building of a multi-million-dollar headquarters, a grand erection? And Madam President, when we desperately need the trucks, everybody in Barbados know we need the trucks. It has been a cry. It has been on the lips of almost everybody for the last 5 years. Where is the provision for it? It is not in these estimates. You know what? Let's talk about Cahill. Let's talk about Cahill. Because, Madam President, I am made to understand that the Cahill project was pulled. That's what I am made to understand. Now, as a lawyer, I know you don't go about pulling signed contracts without penalties. I would like somebody to come to the fore and disclose to Barbados what is the real liability of the government of Barbados. What is it that we, the people of Barbados, are going to have to pull our pockets to pay for that catastrophe? That was a misguided attempt to enter a contract with the Cahill people. Why is there so much secrecy about this, and all surrounding one minister and one ministry? Madam President, we've had problems with the sewage plant and a lack of haste by this government to deal with it. You can't deal with something if you don't admit that the problem exists. Madam President, every which way we are seeing deficiencies. There's nothing in these estimates to suggest that major road repairs are going to happen this year. Nothing. And if there's anything worse than the garbage situation in Barbados, is the pothole situation in Barbados. There's nothing in these estimates to suggest that we are seriously undertaking the task of debushing in Barbados and protecting our environment to minimize the risk of disease by, to quote from Senator Todd, by vectors, born by vectors. Nothing in these estimates to suggest the purchase of new buses. Rather, we're now hearing that the government plans to enter contracts with private suppliers to provide bus services to schools. The most brilliant, and I give Jack his jacket, the most brilliant campaign ad ever was the ad last elections with the little old lady on the bus. I give Jack his jacket. That resonated with the people of Barbados. Now I hope they do an ad and come back and say, well, we gave you free bus fares, but we took away the buses. You don't have to pay for the bus, but you can't get a bus because we have no money to buy buses. So you ain't lost nothing because you weren't paying anyhow. That is this government. Madam President, everybody is crying out about the bus service. The bus service to the area that I frequent, Madam President, to Ferry Valley, to Chancery Lane, to Long Beach Estates, is erratic and poor. If you get a bus once a day out there, it is a luxury. Madam President, they had somebody who had to resort to the press to say that you cannot get a bus going into Ferry Valley, although buses are routed for that area. But you know what? The government has privatized certain routes. And unlike the transport board, where you can mandate that the bus goes to where it's supposed to go to, they have no control of the ZRs want to dispatch them on the way. But you know what? The old people and the children are not paying for it on the transport board buses, but they have to pay when the private buses come and when the ZRs come. Madam President, our bus service is a disgrace. Don't talk about the state of Fairchild Street itself. The Fairchild Street bus stand, I see nothing in the estimates to do with Fairchild Street bus stand. As a child, I used to catch bus. I used to be in Fairchild Street bus stand every day. I went in there, Madam President, one time recently.
On a point of order, Madam President. Senator Abrams is misleading the chamber when he suggests that there's nothing in the estimates to indicate that government is committing funds to road construction. I refer to page 2. Sorry, let me, the mic wasn't on, Madam President. Let me just repeat, I'm raising on a point of order. Senator Abrams is misleading this chamber when he suggests that there's nothing in this year's estimates to support government's road program. But I refer to two sections under head 40, Ministry of Transport and Works, I'm reading from page 206. Sub-program 0530, titled IDB Road Rehabilitation and Improving Connectivity. This provides for the improvement of the road infrastructure to enhance the tourism competitive, reduce congestion, and improve safety on the roads, Madam President. Millions of dollars, Madam President, over $7 million. And secondly, on the next page, under the same head 40, program 5110, Road Network Services, subprogram 0545, Road Rehabilitation Special Project, provides for the continuation of the highway rehabilitation program, millions of dollars, Madam President.
And Madam President, and when are they going to start? When, Madam President, we've had road rehabilitation recently which involved patching potholes that when the rain comes back down, the patches are gone immediately. You're wasting time. You said there was none. You're blowing into the wind. Madam President, when? The promises are too many and too long to fulfillment. The people are tired, Madam President. I'm tired. There's nothing in these estimates suggesting we're moving forward as a country. A lot of long talk, Madam President. Smoke and noise. Madam President, any plan put forward for this country must of necessity deal with the Transport Board and the Public Transportation Service. It must deal with the potholes in the road. It must deal with the bushing, and it must deal with the collection of waste management. Madam President, we need to clean up Barbados. We need to clean up the garbage. We need to clean Barbados up of the bush. We need to clean Barbados up of corruption. Madam President, we need to clean Barbados up of sewage. It is a national disgrace what is happening on the South Coast. Where are the plans outlined in these estimates? Where is money voted to take us forward from the crippling and embarrassing situation we find ourselves in as a country? I'm not ashamed to be a Barbadian. I'm proud to be a Barbadian. I'm ashamed of what is happening in Barbados. The Minister of the Environment, Madam President, is the worst performing minister in government. The worst. The contracts he's made with private waste haulers instead of buying trucks have cost us millions a year. We could have had trucks owned by the Sanitation Service Authority and properly collected in garbage in Barbados by now if this minister was serious. We spent money on everything but the trucks. Why is he singularly silent in the face of perhaps the worst environmental disaster in Barbadian history? Why does the minister not unpick his teeth and talk about the environmental impact of all the sewage in the street and what is happening in Graham Hall Swamp? Why does the minister not unpick his teeth and talk about the proposed plans and how they may contaminate the water table and give assurances and contaminating the beaches? Why does he not unpick his teeth and talk? Why is there illegal dumping all over Barbados, but this government and this minister are too proud to dial back on the tipping fee that sparked it off in the first place? Madam President, I recently was visiting somebody in Chancery Lane, and I was talking to a lady, and she was complaining about a house next door to her that was overgrown with bush, and she begged for relief from it. And she said, but Mr. Abrams, and then there are all the rats and the mosquitoes, and as if on cue, one of the largest rats that I've seen in my life ran across in front of me into the property. One of the largest rats, Madam President, that couldn't be a country rat, that'd be a town rat. That had to be a town rat. We are overrun by rats because this government is doing nothing. The critical things that need to be done, the critical things, Madam President, that need to be done are not being done, but we're being offered promises and urged to keep
point of order, Madam President. Senator Abrams is misleading this chamber because it's this Democratic Labour Party administration in the last year restarted the debushing program under the aegis of the Ministry of Health. The supplementary funds were voted for in the other place, Madam President, and this mitigates against the spread of vector.
Tell that to the lady who lives next to the overgrown house where I saw the rat that looked like a small puppy. The only thing it didn't do was bark.
Madam President, try.
Member has 9 minutes.
Listen, let him finish. Don't disturb him.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, the point is, it is all well and good for this government to ignore every opinion that's not its own. That has been a hallmark of this particular government. Ignore and ridicule and cry down everything that is not your opinion, that did not emanate from you. This government has become experts at advising itself and ignoring every other opinion that is contrary. And we want to talk about democratic government. We want to talk about democracy in Barbados. When the people have no say, when the other senators have no say, when nobody else has a say besides a self-advising government, then what do we have? That is why I fear when we hit the 5th of March and Parliament dissolves, and there's a free-for-all, and this government can do whatever it wants. Not the government, the cabinet of Barbados can do whatever it wants without any supervision, without any parliamentary oversight. I fear for Barbados, Madam President. The estimates are solely put here to allow them to live along until the Prime Minister calls another election. Madam President, I wasn't going to touch this, but somebody talked about raising the bar, and Senator Watson spoke about, you know, that sometimes you have to allow for other views. And he even suggested changes to the Senate, which may not make him very popular. But he's a man who speaks his mind, and I appreciate that. And for the most part, Madam President, over the last 5 years, although we've had some robust discussions, robust and strong, they've generally been with an air of respect. So, Madam President, when we get to a point where people are talking about the Parliament of Barbados and the Senate of Barbados and crying it down, it hurts my heart. It hurts my heart when a minister can stand up in the other place and launch the most cowardly and scathing and defamatory personal attack on me and go on unabated for 15 minutes. And I say cowardly because he did it under the guise and the umbrella of parliamentary privilege. But Madam President, if you have a chance to speak to him, then tell him I dare him to come and say that outside of Parliament. Come and say in the public, Madam President, don't be a coward, be a man. Say outside where the rules of the court relating to defamation take hold are effective. We need to raise our parliamentary standards, Madam President. I am proud and pleased and privileged by the experience that I've managed to have in this Senate. I have made friends in this Senate down this line here, Madam President, and even across the other side. Despite what you may hear, Madam President, I quite like Senator Yates has made my life interesting over the last 5 years. One of my takeaways from this Senate, Madam President, is going to be Senator Yates. Senator Todd has taught me about the restorative powers of cucumbers. My point is, we should never degenerate in here to behavior that we know is wrong and defamatory and hide it under parliamentary privilege. And I hope that others in the other place are hearing, and I hope that particular minister is hearing. When I say that he is the worst minister in the worst government, I'm not defending him, ma'am. I am speaking the truth from my heart. From my heart. From my heart. But, Madam President, the time of reckoning draweth nigh. The time of reckoning draweth nigh. On the plus side of this debate, Madam President, we have some excellent presentations from the independent senators. I don't want to single anybody out, but I already spoken about Senator Walker and his excellent presentation where he tried to fill in the blanks that were left by the feeble initial efforts. Madam President, I also, Senator Walker is the most, Senator Walker, ma'am, is the most modest person. I also wish to compliment the independent senators for their contribution. But Madam President, in closing, Senator Bayasuku had the temerity to declare that Barbados is doing well. I don't know which Barbados she's living in. But she may be onto something, because this DLP government has been very successful in creating two Barbadoses. One Barbados for the few privileged, and the other Barbados that the vast majority of us exist in, counting our pennies and putting back things in the supermarket. Items that we can't afford and we won't take, not because we don't need them, but because we just can't pay for them. The Barbados where people are stranded for transport. The Barbados where a lot of people are unable to go to university. The Barbados where visitors and residents are walking through sewage on the South Coast. This is the Barbados that Senator Bayasuku and this DLP government thinks is doing so well. Madam President, George Orwell, in his book Animal Farm, produced one of the most famous quotes: 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. That came to symbolize that all who are with us are right, everybody who is against us is wrong. And he went on from there, Madam President, when he had the animals on board, he then went on to further clarify, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. That book has obviously replaced the Bible in the possession of many from this Democratic Labour Party government. Madam President, on many occasions I've been subject to personal attacks, where everything that I have said as constructive has been ignored. I've seen other independent senators get it too. Attack the person, don't focus on the message. On the occasions when egg has been on their face and legislation had to be dialed back or brought back for repeal or amendment based on things that I've said, I've tried to not lord it over. But it focuses and points to something. If all you are hearing everywhere is that you are right, you are right, you are right, then somebody who's talking to you is not thinking for themselves. And a government does not need, a strong government is not one that has a lot of yes people. A strong government is one that takes advice and can admit when it is wrong. For this government, Madam President, the money has run out. The ideas have run out. The people's patience have run out. Time has run out. These estimates do not help in any way. We did not do well last year. We did not do well the year before. We did not do well the year before that. We have not done well since 2008. Today we are not doing well. And with this AFP 2018, we are unlikely to do well either. Don't care how good a plan it is, Madam President. If the people in charge of activating the plan are incompetent, then the plan will fail. It doesn't matter if you have a Ferrari or a BMW or a Mercedes-Benz. If you can't drive, you are a danger and a menace to everybody else on the road. Madam President, one gem that I took was Senator Bayasuku's most unfortunate analogy about supporting the government no matter what. She spoke about the child at sports, and I can visualize this. The child at sports that is running the race, and the child gets confused and stops running, then starts running off in a different direction. She said we should not boo that child. We should not boo that child. We should support and encourage that child and cheer it on. That was perhaps the best and worst analogy that I've ever heard. The worst definitely I've heard in this chamber. I agree we should not boo the child who got confused and ran off on a tangent on its own. But equally, Madam President, we should not re-elect that child to run a government and pin the fortunes of a nation on that child. We all know it. And let me remind Senator Suku of it. Since she thinks the estimate presentation is about music appreciation, through you, Madam President, I would like her to know the country's sick. The country ain't well, but we shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. And thank God for Barbadians that the day of deliverance is someday very, very soon. Madam President, I thank you.